Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayana Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudirye Nashtaprayeshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttam Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtaki. So continuing with the discussion on Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 11, Chapter 8, the story of Pingala, text number 19 onwards. Jivyati pramathinya janoras vimohita mrityum mritchati asat buddhir minastu badishar yatha. Just as a fish incited by the desire to enjoy his tongue is fatally trapped on the fisherman's hook, similarly, a foolish person is bewildered by the extremely disturbing urges of the tongue and is thus ruined. The fisherman places meaty bait on a sharp hook and easily attracts the unintelligent fish who's greedy to enjoy its tongue. Similarly, people are mad after gratifying their tongues and lose all discrimination in their eating habits. For momentary gratification, they construct huge slaughterhouses and kill millions of innocent creatures. And by inflicting such atrocious sufferings, they prepare a ghastly future for themselves. But even if one eats only the food authorized in the Veda, there is still danger. One may eat too sumptuously, and then the artificially stuffed belly will create pressure on the sexual organs. Thus, one will fall down into the lower modes of nature and commit sinful activities that lead to the death of one's spiritual life. From the fish, one could carefully learn the real dangers involved in gratifying the tongue. So, for the taste of the tongue, we do so many crazy things. People, I mean, here it is talking about the slaughterhouses, and there are videos where they serve live fish on the plates. They fry it, but they don't let it die. And the fish is suffering in the plate, and people are eating and laughing. I don't know what kind of fun they get out of it. And similarly, they want other animals to be cooked live in front of them so that they can eat the fresh meat. This is, and how they're going to suffer in the future, they don't even know that. And that's ignorance. Indriyani jayantyashu nirahara manishina varjitva tu rasanam tanniranasya vardate. By fasting, learned men quickly bring all of the senses except the tongue under control, because by abstaining from eating, such men are afflicted with an increased desire to gratify the sense of taste. In South America, there is a saying that when the belly is full, the heart is content. Thus, one who is eating sumptuously is jolly, and if one is deprived of proper food, one's appetite becomes even more voracious. An intelligent person, however, does not fall under the control of the tongue, but rather tries to make progress in Krishna consciousness. By accepting the remnants of food offered to the Lord in prasadam, one gradually purifies the heart and automatically becomes simple and austere. That is required to not just plain fasting, fasting with service to Krishna and then eating prasadam, then the real control and the real control of the senses and purification of heart can happen. In this connection, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur states that the business of the tongue is to gratify itself with the varieties of flavor. But by wandering in the 12 forests of Brajmandal, one can be freed from the 12 flavors of material sense gratification. The five principal divisions of material relations are neutral admiration, servitude, friendship, parental affection, and conjugal love. The seven subordinate features of material relationships are material humor, astonishment, chivalry, compassion, anger, dread, and ghastliness. Originally, these 12 rasas or flavors of relationships are exchanged between the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the living entity in the spiritual world. And by wandering in the 12 forests of Vrindavan, one can re-spiritualize the 12 flavors of personal existence. Thus, one will become a liberated soul, free from all material desires. If one artificially tries to give up sense gratification, especially that of the tongue, the attempt will be a failure. And in fact, one's desire for sense gratification will increase as a result of artificial deprivation. Only by experiencing real spiritual pleasure in relationship with Krishna can one give up material desires. So especially of the tongue, even Bhakti Vinod Thakur said, this tongue is the most difficult to control. And the fish gets caught by this tongue. Tava jitendriyo nasyad vijitandriya puma vijitani indriya pumam na jayed rasanam yavad jitam sarvam jite rase. Although one may conquer all of the other senses, as long as the tongue is not conquered, it cannot be said that one has controlled his senses. However, if one is able to control the tongue, then one is understood to be in full control of all the senses. That's how important it is. By eating, one gives energy and activity to all of the senses, and thus if the tongue is uncontrolled, all of the senses will be dragged down to the material platform of existence. Therefore, by all means, one must control the tongue. If one fasts, then all of the other senses become weak and lose their potency. The tongue, however, becomes more greedy to taste delicious preparations, and when one finally indulges the tongue, all of the senses quickly go out of the control. Therefore, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur advises that one accept Mahaprasad, or the remnants of Lord's food, in a moderate proportion. Since the tongue's function is also to vibrate, one should vibrate the glorious holy name of the Supreme Lord and taste the ecstasy of pure Krishna consciousness. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, Rasavarjam Rasopyasya Param Drishtva Nivartate. Only by the higher taste of Krishna consciousness can one give up the deadly lower taste that keeps one imprisoned in material bondage. So this is the process, not just artificially abstain from eating. Nobody can do that. Everybody has to eat something to live. So the real process is to give it a higher taste. Higher taste means Krishna Prasad. No matter what, eat Krishna Prasad. Even if it is sumptuous, still slowly will develop the taste that we don't want to eat. We just want to eat simple prasadam and do bhajan. That's all. Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur states that as long as one's intelligence is materially covered, one cannot understand the pleasure of Krishna consciousness. Trying to enjoy without Krishna, the living entity leaves the abode of the Supreme Lord, called Vrajabhumi, and comes down into the material world, where he quickly loses control of his senses. One becomes particularly victimized by the tongue, belly, and the genitals, which exert intolerable pressure on the conditioned soul. These desires subside, however, only when one reestablishes one's blissful relationship with the Lord, who is actually the reservoir of all pleasure. So he is a reservoir of all pleasure, means we can get all the pleasure from him, including for the taste of the tongue, without even eating physically anything. Because all the pleasure is in him. One who is attached to the taste of Krishna consciousness automatically follows all of the rules and regulations of religious life due to spontaneous attraction to Vishuddha, or the mode of pure goodness. Without such spontaneous attraction, one is certainly bewildered by the pushing of the material senses. And this pushing of the material senses is so strong. And it doesn't last just for one lifetime. It goes on and on and on and on. This is what the whole material life is. Just try to gratify one's senses. That's all one is trying to do. Nothing else. And same, 5 working, 5 knowledge acquiring senses, and the mind. That's all. Every living entity, every living entity, even animals, birds, they're just trying to gratify these senses. And we think that we are enjoying. That is Maya. Even the beginning stage of devotion service called sadhana bhakti is so powerful that it brings one to the platform of anartha nivritti, where one becomes free from unwanted sinful habits and gains relief from the pleasure of the tongue, belly and genitals. Thus one is delivered from the bondage of material addiction and can no longer be cheated by the allurements of the material energy. As it is said, all that glitters is not gold. In this regard, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur recommends that we consider the following song written by his father, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur. And this we sing every time if we eat something. Sharira vidya jal, jadendriya tahikal, jive fele vishay sagre, tar madhya jivati lobma sudurmati, ताके चिता कठिन संसार है कृष्ण बड़ा दयामय करिवारे जिह्वा जय स्वप्रसादन दिलो भाई सही अन्नामृत कहो राधा कृष्ण गुण गाओ प्रेमे दाको श्री चैतन्य निताय. O Lord, this material body is a lump of ignorance, and the senses are a network of paths to death. Material body, lump of ignorance, lump of flesh, bones, and whatever muscles and cartilage and whatever is in there. But it's all ignorance. And the senses are a network of paths to death. Senses are a network. So much of network we talk about all these days. But network of paths to death. Somehow we have fallen into this ocean of material sense enjoyment, and of all the senses, the tongue is most voracious and uncontrollable. It's very difficult to conquer the tongue in this world. But you, dear Krishna, are very kind to us and have given us such nice prasad just to control the tongue. Now we take this prasadam to our full satisfaction and glorify the Lordship, Shri Radha Krishna, and in love call for the help of Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda. So this is a wonderful bhajan, just very short bhajan, but carries such a huge meaning. The tongue, so difficult to control. But to control this tongue, Krishna has given Swaprasadanand Lobhai. Swaprasad. And that's the only way we can control. And now we talk about Pingala, the story of Pingala. This is a chapter's title. Pingala nama veshaya sita videhe nagare pura tasya me shikshitam kinchan nibodha nripanandana. O son of kings, previously in the city of Videha, there dwelled a prostitute named Pingala. Now please hear what I have learned from that lady. Swaswaranye kada kantam sanket upaneshyati abhuta kale bahirdware bibhrati rupam uttamam. Once that prostitute, desiring to bring a lover into her house, stood outside in the doorway at night showing her beautiful form. Marga agacchato viksha purushana purushrisha tana shulka dana vittavatta kantan mene artha kamaki. O best among men, this prostitute was very anxious to get money, and as she stood on the street at night, she studied all the men who were passing by, thinking, "Oh, this one surely has money. I know he can pay the price, and I'm sure he would enjoy my company very much." Thus she thought about all the men on the street. आगतेषु पयातेषु सा संकेतोपजीवनी अपि अन्यो वित्तवान् कोऽपि मामुपैष्यति भूरिधा एवं दुराशया ध्वस्त निद्रा द्वारे अवलंबति निर्गच्छन्ति प्रविशति निशीथं समपद्यत. As the prostitute Pingla stood in the doorway, many men came and went walking by her house. Her only means of sustenance was prostitution, and therefore she anxiously thought, maybe this one who is coming now is very rich. Oh, he's not stopping, but I'm sure someone else will come. This is how the prostitutes stand on their doorway and they try to attract all the passers-by. Surely this man who's coming now will want to pay me for my love, and he will probably give lots of money. Thus, with vain hope, she remained leaning against the doorway, unable to finish her business and go to sleep. Out of anxiety, she would sometimes walk out towards the street, and sometimes she went back into her house. In this way, the midnight hour gradually arrived. तस्य वित्ताशया शुष्यद् वक्त्राय दीनचेतसः निर्वेदा परमो जज्ञे चिंता हेतु सुखावहा. As the night wore on, the prostitute who intensely desired money gradually became morose, and her face dried up. Thus, being filled with anxiety for money and most disappointed, she began to feel a great detachment from her situation, and happiness arose in her mind. It appears from these verses that on this particular night, the prostitute Pingla was not at all successful in attracting customers to her house. Being completely frustrated and disappointed, she gradually became indifferent to her situation. Thus, great suffering sometimes leads one to the path of enlightenment. Or, according to a Sanskrit proverb, disappointment gives rise to the greatest satisfaction. The prostitute had dedicated her life to satisfying the lusty desires of many men. Engaging her mind, body, and words in the service of paying lovers, she completely forgot the devotion service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And thus her mind was most unsteady and disturbed. Finally, being completely frustrated, her face and throat drying up, she began to feel indifferent to her situation, and happiness arose in her mind. So she completely forgot devotional service, and she was in her business. But when she did not get, then she began to feel indifferent to her situation, and happiness arose in her mind. Tasya nirvena chittaya gitam shinu yatha mama nirvedasha pashanam purushasya yatha hyasihi. The prostitute felt disgusted with the material situation and thus became indifferent to it. Indeed, detachment acts like a sword, cutting to pieces the binding network of material hopes and desires. Now, please hear from me the song sung by the prostitute in that situation. The network of material desires is created when one falsely thinks that he can establish himself permanently in the material world. This binding network should be cut by the sword of detachment. Otherwise, one will be forced to wander in the illusory network of Maya with no understanding of liberated life on the spiritual platform. So this detachment, actually, it's all Krishna's doing. He brings that kind of frustration and the detachment, and then brings that living entity towards him on the path of spiritual progress. Nahi anga jata nirvedo deh bandham jihasati yatha vijnana rahito manujo mamatam drita. So Pingla is singing, "O king, just as a human being who's bereft of spiritual knowledge never desires to give up his false sense of proprietorship over many material things, similarly a person who has not developed detachment, never desires to give up the bondage of the material body. Pingla Vacha, Aho me moho vitatim, Pashyata vijitatmana, Yakanta dasatah kamam, Kamaya yena balisha. The prostitute Pingla said, just see how greatly illusioned I am. Because I cannot control my mind, just like a fool, I desire lusty pleasure from an insignificant man. In material existence, all of the senses are attracted by different objects, and thus the conditioned soul becomes a first-class fool. The cause of material life is one's indifference to the absolute truth. The conditioned soul considers himself to be the lord and enjoyer of the material world and considers the purpose of life to be sense gratification. The more one tries to enjoy the material world, the more one's illusion increases. It appears from this verse that the prostitute Pingla was not only earning her livelihood through prostitution, but was actually enjoying her illicit contact with innumerable men. The words Kanta Dasata indicate that she was freely selling herself without discrimination to the most ordinary and useless men, considering them to be lovers. Does she say, I was a great fool? The word Balisha means one who has a childish mentality without practical experience of right and wrong. So somehow this realization doesn't come when we are enjoying our senses. When some frustration sets in, then we get some knowledge. Santam samipe ramanam ratipradam vittapradam nityam imam vihaya akamadam dukha bhayadishoka mohopradam tucham aham bhaje agya. I'm such a fool that I have given up the service of that person who, being eternally situated within my heart, is actually most dear to me. That most dear one is the Lord of the universe, who is the bestower of real love and happiness and the source of all prosperity. Although he is in my own heart, I have completely neglected him. Instead, I have ignorantly served insignificant men who can never satisfy my real desires and who have simply brought me unhappiness, fear, anxiety, lamentation, and illusion. And this is a story of all of us. Pingla is a prostitute. Okay, her example was taken in this chapter. So prostitute, we know, they sell their bodies for the satisfaction of their customers. But don't we do the same thing? Not the way prostitutes do, but we also go with our resume to different employers. Okay, please hire me for my services, and I can do this for you. I can do this programming, I have done this project, and I have done this programming. I know this, and this is my qualification. This is my education. So we are in the same context. We can be seen also. And after a while, when we become either old or we haven't updated our education or technical know-how, then we can be not required in the jobs anymore. And then we can have the same anxiety as Pingla is having. So from that angle, we can understand these purports. Pingla laments that she chose to serve most sinful, useless men. She falsely thought they would bring her happiness and neglected to serve the actual Lord of the heart, Krishna. She could understand how foolishly she had struggled for money, not knowing that the Supreme Lord is always inclined to award prosperity to his sincere devotee. The prostitute was proud of her ability to please men, but she now laments that she did not try to please the Supreme Lord by loving service. The Supreme Lord is completely aloof from the transactions of the material world. Lord Krishna is the actual enjoyer of everyone and everything, but one must learn to please, how to please the Lord by pure spiritual service. So that is a real goal. But we just completely forget that, and we are just illusioned by material prosperity. And then I want more and more and more. Aho mayatma paritapito vritha sanketa vrityate vigare vartaya strena naradyartha trisho anushochayat kritena vittam ratimatmane chati. Oh, how I have uselessly tortured my own soul. I have sold my body to lusty, greedy men who are themselves object of pity, thus practicing the most abominable profession of a prostitute. I hope to get money and sex pleasure. The art of prostitution is based on awakening the enjoying propensity in men. Apparently, this prostitute was so foolish that she maintained a romantic conception of her profession and was actually trying to enjoy loving affairs with their customers, not realizing that they were the lowest of men with the most abominable motives. Like the prostitute Pingala, one should understand that by giving our devotional service of the Lord, one simply becomes a victim of the illusory energy and suffers greatly. Yad sthiti bhir nirmit vanshya sthunam tvacha rom nakha pinadham ksharana navadvaram agaram etad vinamutra purnam madhupatikanya. This material body is like a house in which I, the soul, am living. The bones forming my spine, ribs, arms, and legs are like the beams, cross beams, and pillars of the house. And the whole structure, which is full of stool and urine, is covered by skin, hair, and nails. The 9 doors leading into this body are constantly excreting foul substances. Besides me, what woman could be so foolish as to devote herself to this material body, thinking that she might find pleasure and love in this contraption? And this is true for all of us. The 9 doors leading into and out of the body are the 2 eyes, 2 nostrils, the mouth, the 2 ears, the genitals, and the anus. Vansha or spine also means bamboo, and indeed the skeleton appears to resemble a bamboo construction. Just as bamboo can be immediately burned to ashes or chopped into pieces, similarly the material body, which is constantly deteriorating, may at any moment be crushed into powder, cut into pieces, drowned, burned, and suffocated, and so on. Eventually, the body must disintegrate, and therefore there is certainly no one as unfortunate as one who has dedicated himself, heart and soul, to this flimsy body, which is filled with unpleasant elements. But this is this is our identity. We always identify with this body. And now when she is frustrated, now she is thinking, what am I? And this is our structure actually. Beams, cross beams, pillars, and which is the whole structure is what? Full of stool and urine and covered by skin, hair, and nails, and it just looks so nice from outside. But inside it's nothing but we don't even look at that substance. What's inside the skin. Videhanam purehyasmin aham ekava mudhi yanyam icchanti asatyasmad atmadat kamam achyutat. Certainly in this city of Videha, I alone am completely foolish. I neglected the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who awards us everything, even our original spiritual form, and instead I desire to enjoy sense gratification with many men. In this city of Videha, although Pingala is in the city of Videha, but she is thinking about her body. Or she can be thinking of Videha city. I'm alone and completely foolish. No, everybody is foolish actually. They have not realized it yet. Surit preshta tamo nath atma chayam sharirina tam vikriyatmana evaham rame anena yatha rama. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is absolutely the most dear one for all living beings because he is everyone's well-wisher and Lord. He is a Supreme Soul situated in everyone's heart. Therefore, I'll now pay the price of complete surrender and thus purchasing the Lord, I'll enjoy with him just like Lakshmi Devi. The real friend of all conditioned souls is the Supreme Lord, and only he can award the highest perfection in life. By following the example of Lakshmi Devi, who always remains at the lotus feet of the Lord, one will certainly obtain eternal happiness. One should make the best use of the material body, which is a bad bargain, and surrender one's body, mind, and words to the Lord. Paying such a price, one can purchase the Lord, who is everyone's dearest well-wisher. Thus, one's ancient propensity for sense gratification will automatically be controlled. But we just have to surrender. We have to slowly surrender and engage in devotional service. Then this ancient propensity for sense gratification can be controlled. Kiyat priyam te vyabhajan kama ye kamada naraha adi antavanto bharyaya deva va kal vidrutaha. Men provide sense gratification for women, but all these men and even the demigods in heaven have a beginning and an end. They're all temporary creations who will be dragged away by time. Therefore, how much actual pleasure or happiness could any of them ever give to their wives? In this material world, everyone is basically pursuing his personal sense gratification, and thus everyone is being ruined by the influence of time. On the material platform, no one actually helps anyone else. So-called material love is simply a cheating process, as the Lady Pingla is now discovering. On the material platform, no one actually helps anyone else. Everybody is trying to enjoy his senses. That's all. नूनम में भगवान प्रीतो विष्णु के नापि कर्मणा निर्वेदो अयम दुराशाय यन्मे जाता सुखावह. Although I most stubbornly hope to enjoy the material world, somehow or other detachment has arisen in my heart, and it's making me very happy now. Therefore, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vishnu, must be pleased with me. Without even knowing it, I must have performed some activity satisfying to him, and that is Agyat Sukriti, that she must have done sometime, some lifetime. Mavam Sur Mand Bhagyaya Klesha Nirveda Hetava Yena Anubandham Nirhritya Purusha Shamam Richati. A person who has developed detachment can give up the bondage of material society, friendship, and love. And a person who undergoes great suffering gradually becomes, out of hopelessness, detached and indifferent to the material world. Thus, due to my great suffering, such detachment awoke in my heart. Yet how could I have undergone such merciful suffering if I were actually unfortunate? Therefore, I am in fact fortunate and have received the mercy of the Lord. He must somehow or other be pleased with me. So by mercy of Prabhupada, we have been somehow or other engaged in this devotion service, came in contact with devotion service, and now making progress. So somehow or other, Krishna must have been pleased with whatever we did in previous lifetimes. Tenopakritam adaya shirasa gramya sangata tyaktva durasha sharanam rajami tamadhishwaram. With devotion, I accept the great benefit that the Lord has bestowed upon me. Having given up my sinful desires for ordinary sense gratification, I now take shelter of Him, the Supreme Personality of God. Santushta Shraddhetad Yatha Labhena Jivati Viharami Mim anu vyaham atmana ramanen vai. I am now completely satisfied and I have full faith in the Lord's mercy. Therefore, I will maintain myself with whatever comes of its own accord. I shall enjoy life with only the Lord because He is a real source of love and happiness. Sansarakupe patitam vishyaramushite kshanam rastam kalahinatmanam ko anya stratum adhishvaraha. The intelligence of the living entity is stolen away by the activities of sense gratification, and thus he falls into the dark well of material existence. Within that well, he is then seized by the deadly serpent of time. Who else but the Supreme Personality of Godhead could save the poor living entity from such a hopeless condition? Pingala stated in a previous verse that even the demigods are unable to give actual happiness to a woman. One may question who has authorized this lady to reject even such exalted personalities as Brahma, Shiva, and the other demigods. The answer given here is that if one actually wants to solve all the problems of life and go back to God, then the only solution is to take shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord. It is well known that the demigods themselves are subject to birth and death. So Vishnu, Lord Vishnu is a real deliverer of liberation for everyone. Atma vyatmano gopta nirvidyeta yada khilat apramatta idam pashet grastam kala hina jagat. When the living entity sees that the entire universe has been seized by the serpent of time, he becomes sober and sane at that time, detaches himself from all material sense gratification. In that condition, the living entity is qualified to be his own protector. So that sanity has to come to us. That no matter what we have with the time is going to take it away. Time is going to devour everything. So what's the use? In this verse, Pingala states that by the Lord's mercy, a self-realized soul can see that the entire universe is existing within the jaws of the great serpent of time. Certainly, this is not a promising situation, and one who sees it loses his desire for sense gratification. Thus, by the Lord's causeless mercy, the spiritually sane living entity can protect himself from illusion. And over again in the scripture, these examples have been given. But we just tend to forget everything and again get into the same mode of our lives. And when the Yaksh asked Yudhishthira Maharaj, what's the most amazing thing in this world? And Maharaj said that we see everybody dying around us, and still we think we're going to live forever. I'm not going to die. It's going to happen with us also. Since Pingala is now glorifying the personality of God for his mercy in awarding salvation, the following question might ask, is she worshipping the Lord out of love, or is she merely a salvationist desiring liberation from material existence? She is already liberated. In answer, it may be said that in a Krishna conscious situation, she is already liberated, even though remaining in this world. Her program will now be simply to render loving service to the personality of Godhead without any personal desire, including that of salvation. Shri Brahmanu Vacha, Evam Vyavasitya Matir, Durasham Kanta Tarshajam, Chitvopashamam Asthaya, Shayam Upaviveshasa. The Avadhuta said, thus her mind completely made up, Pingala cut off all her sinful desires to enjoy sex pleasure with lovers, and she became situated in perfect peace. Then she sat down on her bed. Asha hi paramam dukkham, nairashayam paramam sukham, yatha sanchidya kantasham, sukham sushvapa Pingala. Material desire is undoubtedly the cause of the greatest unhappiness. material desire or our expectations, actually. And freedom from such desire is the cause of greatest happiness. Therefore, completely cutting off our desire to enjoy, so-called lovers, Pingla very happily went to sleep. So this is the story of all of us, whether we are engineers or doctors or businessmen or this or that. We're always looking for, as employees, we're looking for different employers. Okay, he will give me a better job, or he will get me a better package, better projects, better position. Or as businessmen, or this customer will give me a better business, that customer will give me a better business. And this goes on and on and on and on. These desires, and more than desires, the expectations that he will make me happy or she will make me happy. This gives us the greatest unhappiness. All our expectations, or all, even with Krishna, we should not have expected. We just want to serve him. That's it. And he'll give us the best of the pleasures we can't even imagine. So much to learn from these scriptures. And can you imagine, Pingla is a prostitute. Her example is given in Srimad Bhagavatam, the topmost literature. So how important this must be. So thus ends the purpose to 11th canto, 8th chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled The Story of Pingla. I guess we can stop here. See anybody has any questions or comments. Okay, so you all have a safe and wonderful day. Hare Krishna. Jai Shri Prabhupada.